Hey guys, I'm Deric here again, a tech founder and a self-taught developer myself. And a few years ago, I was exactly where you might actually be right now. Excited about coding, but also anxious, wondering if all this effort will ever land me that very first development job. Fast forward to today, I've mentored hundreds of aspiring developers through my coding bootcamp, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. In this video, I want to share the biggest mistakes that I fell for and see others fall for that can derail your journey as a self-taught developer. Before we dive in, a quick personal note for just kind of giving you a bit of introduction about who I am. Since 2020, I've been building my own tech businesses. By 2022 to 2023, I launched and stabilized Sigma School, which is an online coding school that's now profitable and running at 80% profit margins. We've helped people from all walks of life learn to code and actually get jobs. And I don't say that to brag, but to show you that I've been in the trenches of self-learning and mentoring. I even got a bit comfortable last year coasting on our success, but I realized that I'm not ready to chill. I'm hungry to have a bigger impact, to scale up and help even more people break into tech. So believe me, everything I'll share comes from real experience, mine and others like me, and a genuine desire to see you succeed. All right, so let's get into the mistakes. And by the way, as one of my role models, Charlie Munger, likes to do, we'll use a bit of inversion by figuring out what not to do so you can avoid failure by default. Munger famously said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. We'll identify these career killer moves so you can steer clear from these mistakes. So the first one would be on believing the hype, right? On having unrealistic expectations. When I ask new coders why they're discouraged, I often hear something like, I've been coding for 6 months and I still don't have a job. Did I pick the wrong path, right? Upon a few questions, I usually discover they started with some TikTok or ad promising a quick path to a 6-figure development job. Sounds familiar, right? The first big mistake is starting out with what I call false expectations about the timeline and effort required. I fell for this myself too, initially. Well, the good thing is making it sound easy may help me take the first step so much easier, me and a lot more like me. But when the reality sets in, right, the first big mistake is just having this false expectations about the timeline and the effort required. So I remember seeing success stories of I learned to code in 10 weeks and I got hired in Google, and it made me think like, I was failing when I didn't replicate that overnight success. But the truth here is that these stories are the rare exceptions, not the rule, right? In reality, becoming job ready as a software developer often takes more months, many more months of consistent learning and practice, right? If you're doing it part-time while working a job or studying, it could take even longer than that. And that's completely okay. That's part of the journey. You need time to build those programming muscles in your head, right? As one of my heroes and role models, investor Naval Ravikant, has a quote that hits really hard here. The enemy of peace of mind is expectations drilled into you by society and by other people. If everyone around you or every video you watch says it's easy, you're going to be coding at FANG, which is the top tech companies in the US in 3 months, of course you will feel crushed when that does not happen. And I'm here to reset that expectation. It takes time to master coding. Think of it like learning a musical instrument or learning a new language. That's basically what you're doing, right? You wouldn't expect to be concert ready in a few weeks. So if you started this journey assuming that it will be a sprint, right? Give yourself permission to treat it something more like a marathon, right? In practical terms, financially plan for a longer buffer and a longer learning period if you can. If you're going full-time, completely full-time, self-taught, try to have savings for income to support you for 6 months up to a year. And that removes the panic of I must get a job in 3 months or I'll run out of money, I'll give up. Success may just be a few months away, and if you continue persevering through it, you will achieve it. And doing this helps remove a huge source of anxiety for many people, and removing that ticking time bomb lets you focus on actually learning instead of constantly worrying if you're falling behind. And I know that patience is hard, right? We live in a world of quick dopamine hits and overnight success stories on social media, but whenever you feel that panic of falling behind, remember why you started. For me, it was seeing the freedom and opportunity that tech could provide, with just my 2 hands and a laptop and a good internet connection. I could get remote work, build my own startup, get higher pay, building products at scale, and building it from scratch, completely from nothing to something that people actually use. I even saw an indie hacker making 20K USD per month solo, which lit a fire in me to learn coding. And none of these goals are achieved in mere weeks, but they are achievable with sustained effort, So do not let society's hype timelines undermine your motivation. Set a realistic timeline and you will be much happier with your progress. And by the way, if someone online is promising you a 100K US developer job in like a month, do yourself a favor to stop following this creator because they're selling a fantasy and that's not a roadmap. It's just not realistic if you don't have any prior backgrounds before that, right? So focus on your journey and not the marketing that it's given by these creators or pages. The next trap to avoid is something we call the tutorial hell, because this is when you spend all of your time following along with coding tutorials and courses, but never actually building anything of your own. It feels like progress. It feels really good sitting there watching hours of videos, nodding along, maybe completing coding challenges that the course gives you, building some projects that you could follow along. But then you finish the course, you sit down to start a project from scratch and your mind literally goes blank. You realize that you can't apply what you supposedly learned. And I've been there, right? You feel like you're an idiot, right? Early on, I binged, 50 hours of web development course and I thought, yeah, I got this, But when I tried to make a simple to-do list on my own, I didn't even know where to begin setting up the project. I was just staring at my VS Code screen, and this was the humbling moment that taught me a key lesson, which is that passive learning isn't enough. You have to learn by doing. You have to learn by building something. And in fact, this principle is something I live by and I preach on every single day, right? Remember how I mentioned I run a coding school? Well, our approach is very much influenced by the first principles by people like Peter Levels, right? Peter is a well-known self-taught developer turned web entrepreneur, startup entrepreneur who openly hates on over-relying on courses because he's coding him. People learn best by doing and by building. And I realized this myself in my journey. And in fact, I wrote this in my personal bio, right? I wrote that ultimately I found that real education didn't come from textbooks. The best way to learn was to dive straight into real world problems and to force myself to solve them. And this mindset itself changed everything for me. So how do you escape or avoid tutorial hell? The solution to this is to start building almost instantly, almost immediately. Just start building. Even if you only know 10% of a language's basics, you can create something with it. And after you learn the concept in a tutorial, pause the video and tweak it and apply it in a tiny project. For example, if you learn how to display a list of items in JavaScript, challenge yourself. Can you make a simple to-do list app from scratch using that knowledge? It will not be perfect. You will get stuck. You will Google the errors. You will revisit the tutorial, but that struggle is where the real learning happens. And each time you break out of the tutorial script and do something on your own, you reinforce the knowledge. It's like the difference between recognizing vocabulary in a language class versus actually speaking the language in a real conversation. So let me share a quick story. I had a mentee who completed a popular Python course. He aced the quizzes. He put the exact projects the instructor walked through. He felt ready, like, let's go, right? Then he tried a simple exercise, building a calculator app without looking at any notes, and he was just stuck. And this isn't because he was bad at coding. It's just because he had not practice recalling and applying the concepts, right? We worked together to shift his approach. For every hour in the course, I had him spend 2 hours building something related but different. It was extremely uncomfortable at first, but he had to confront the gaps in his understanding. But within weeks, his confidence skyrocketed. He went from, I don't think I'm learning anything, or like, I don't think coding is for me, right? To, whoa, I just built this entire thing on my own, right? So the takeaway here that I want to share is that you shouldn't just consume, you should create. And as soon as you learn a new concept or a snippet of code, use it in the mini project. It can be as small or as silly as you want, right? Do something that isn't spoon-fed by a tutorial. This breaks you out of tutorial hell and into the real world of problem solving, which is exactly the skill that you need to land a job and succeed in your development job. Well, the next mistake would be not building real projects and obviously forgetting to have fun, right? This mistake sounds similar to tutorial hell, but it's actually a bit different. Even after you start building things on your own, you might fall into another trap, only building cookie cutter projects that you think look good to employers, but don't truly engage you. So let's call this the portfolio checklist mentality. It's when you Google projects every developer should have, and everyone tells you to build yet another to-do app, a weather app, a basic e-commerce site. Sure, these projects demonstrate certain skills, but if you're not genuinely interested in them, you'll hit a motivation wall. And even worse, you will have a portfolio that looks like everyone else's, nothing that stands out. And one thing I learned from legends like Jason Fried, which is the co-founder of Basecamp, and people like Andrew Wilkinson, is that doing something unique or personal, even if it's small, can set you apart. Jason Fried often advises to scratch your own itch, build something that you wish existed in the market. And for me, that was Sigma School. I was frustrated with traditional education and I built the learning platform that I wish I had. As a beginner developer, you might not build an entire startup, or maybe you will, right? But you can still infuse your interest into your projects. So for example, if you love fitness, build a simple workout logger or a nutrition tracker. If you're into gaming, maybe a little score tracker or a mini text-based game. When you work on projects that excite you, two things happen. You stay motivated because it's fun, right? And you can create a portfolio that
truly tells a story about who you are, right? Let me emphasize on the motivation part. If you're only ever coding things that feel like a chore, right? Like your mindset will be things like, oh, I guess I have to build a blog again because some blog said so, right? If you think like that, you're going to burn out very quickly and you will lose interest. And one of the best antidotes to burnout is playfulness, right? Just be creative. Code something weird. Do something funny. Experiment with a new library. Add some personality into it. Even if it's not industry standard, whatever you define that as, right? But it looks cool to you and it means something to you, go and build it. This keeps the spark alive and it gives you a story to tell when you're eventually sitting for your interviews. So I had days in my learning journey where I absolutely did not feel like coding another CRUD application for practice. CRUD meaning create, read, update, and delete. So instead, I spent the entire day making a silly random quote generator that spit out motivational quotes based on some meme, right? It could be useless. You may think it's useless, maybe, but it made me smile. And guess what? I learned how to fetch data from an API and display it, which is a real skill that developers basically need to have. And the bonus bit here is those quirky, fun projects can become awesome talking points in interviews if you frame them right. Suppose you're interviewing at a healthcare startup and you can show them the calorie tracker app that you've tinkered with. It demonstrates like real genuine interest in their domain and proactivity, right? Or say, for example, you're meeting a development team that's super into open source. You can mention how you tried building a little game using an open source game engine over a weekend. And these personal touches make you more memorable. As an employer, I've interviewed a lot of junior developers today. And believe me, after the 10th weather app, they all just blend together. Nothing stands out, right? But the candidate who showed me an app he made to help his family business track inventory, not a school assignment, just something that's built out of necessity, that literally stands out so much because it was real, because he had a story to tell and it made me curious. So the mistake is not building real projects that mean something to you, okay? The fix here is to have fun and to follow your curiosity. Don't worry that every project has to be an enterprise-grade masterpiece. Don't think about that. Early on, it's more important that you finish projects and learn from them than that you're perfectly polished. And if you can solve a real problem, even a tiny one for yourself or someone you know, that's the goal. You will have a story to tell and a deeper sense of accomplishment. Mistake number 4 would be relying on motivation instead of building discipline, right? Let's switch gears to something a bit more psychological. And this is the one silent killer of many self-taught developers. Depending on motivation to carry you through is great, but it will not bring you far. Motivation is that initial excitement that you feel when you decide, I'm going to learn to code and change my life, right? It's awesome. It's the spark that gets you started at first, right? You know, that 2 a.m. energy, you're going to be like, screw it, I'm going to go do it, that feeling, right? But no, motivation is just a sugar rush. It's not going to last. And some days you wake up and you just don't feel like doing it. And the newness has worn off. Or you hit a hard bug yesterday and today you're dreading facing it. This is where a lot of folks start slipping. And they miss one study session, then another, and soon learning to code becomes, oh yeah, I should get back to that someday, right? The truth is, even the best developers have days where they would rather do anything but code. And I certainly did. And I still do occasionally today, right? The difference between those who push through and those who quit isn't that the successful ones always feel motivated. It's that they've built habits and systems to keep them going regardless of their daily motivation levels. In other words, they have discipline, right? Now, I'm not talking about military bootcamp discipline. Though shout out to one of our students, a former military guy who actually tried coding 14 hours a day because he thought he could brute force it. We had to dial that back, right? I'm talking about simple routines and environmental tweaks that made it simple and easier to stick with coding regularly. For example, set aside specific time slots in your week that are coding time, right? And treat them like appointments that you cannot miss. Maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. or an hour every morning before work. Put it on your calendar. Let family or roommates know, hey, if you see me with headphones on at this time, I'm in my coding zone. And I used to be the kind of person who hate rigid schedules, right? One of my role models, Andrew Wilkinson, even preaches designing business around the lifestyle that you want. As in, work should serve life. And I agree with that. One reason I left corporate life was to have more control over my time. But I realized that, and I learned that when it comes to acquiring a tough skill like coding, some structure is actually freeing. It frees you from wanting to feel like it before you can do it, whatever that means, right? You just do it because Tuesday at 8 p.m. is the time that you set for yourself. It's the time that you programmed yourself to sit down and code regardless of how you feel. Paradoxically, once you start coding in those low motivation moments, you often find the motivation kicking in after you begin. And it's really interesting. And that's how it works, right? Action precedes feeling, not always the other way around. Another tip is to track your progress and celebrate the small wins. Discipline isn't just about rigid rules. It's also about giving yourself feedback and rewards. Keep a simple journal or log of what you did each session. For example, today I finally solved that API bug, or followed a tutorial on React hooks and made a simple to-do list app with them. When you look back at a week or a month of these notes, you will see how far you've come, and that can be incredibly motivating in a sustainable way. It's like seeing your gains at the gym. progress fuels the habit loop. Now, I'd be remiss not to mention personal well-being here. Coding is a mental activity, and your mind needs support from your body and environment. Basic stuff: get enough sleep, stay hydrated, don't leave on caffeine alone, get some exercise in. On days when I felt brain dead, it was often because I slept 4 hours and drank 3 cups of coffee and no water. That's a recipe for disaster, by the way. Treat your body kindly so it gives you the energy and the focus that you need during those coding sessions. And one of my mentors gave me the simple advice when I was struggling: when you're tired, learn to rest, not to quit. Sometimes the discipline thing is actually to just take a short break or a brisk walk, then come back refreshed rather than stare zombified at a screen for 5 hours, accomplishing absolutely nothing and then feeling guilty. Finally, remember why you're building discipline. It's to reach that goal of becoming a developer. When motivation wanes, habit and routine will carry you through. And when you do hit a milestone, say you finally built that project or solved that algorithm problem, you'll finally feel a pride that no fleeting burst of motivation can match. And you will know that you've earned it through consistent effort. Mistake number 5 is going through it alone and not going with a group, an accountability group, or a community to get support, right? The self-taught path can be very lonely. You might imagine this, right? It's you, your laptop, a dark room, and endless Stack Overflow searches, or maybe getting ChatGPT to help you now. And yes, there will be a lot of solo work. You can't deny it, right? But do not make the mistake of isolating yourself completely. Going at it alone without any form of support network is not only demotivating, it also slows down your learning. You will inevitably get stuck on bugs or concepts that someone could help you solve within 2 to 3 to even 5 minutes. But if you have no one to ask, you might spin your wheels for days and end up being frustrated and giving up. I experienced both sides of this. And at first, I was too proud, or you can think I was too shy to ask for help. And I thought real programmers figure it out themselves, right? That's what I thought. Oh man, wrong mindset. Real programmers ask for help all the time. They just know where to ask and how to collaborate. And once I started reaching out, joining a few Discord and Slack communities, and later even creating my own community with Sigma School, my learning just skyrocketed and accelerated. Even just having peers to talk to who are on the same journey as you, on the same kind of path as you about to break into tech, that is huge, right? You share tips, you vent about errors, you talk about life problems, celebrate each other's wins. If you don't have a local network, no worries at all. There are plenty of online communities for new developers, like Free Codecamp, Codecademy forums, Reddit communities like Learn Programming, and many coding YouTubers have Discord servers for their audiences. Join 1 or 2 of these communities that resonate with you, or you could just join the one that I have in Sigma School. But here's a pro tip. Don't just join and immediately ask a question without introducing yourself first or contributing. The people who get the best help are often those who engage sincerely. So say hi, mention you're new and what you're learning, respond to others' posts when you can, even if it's just encouragement or I was stuck on that last week too, and here's what helped me, just to build rapport and to relate to someone. So build relationships. And then when you have a question or need advice, folks are so much more willing to dive in and help because you're one of them and not a drive-by asker, just passing along, asking questions and leaving after that. Another form of support is more one-on-one, getting mentorship. And this can be a game changer if you find the right mentor. It can be a senior engineer you met at a local meetup or someone you connected with on LinkedIn who's willing to give you guidance. I know not everyone has access to a personal mentor, so consider this optional, but it's very valuable. Even a single 30-minute call with someone experienced where they review your resume or give you feedback on your project code can save you weeks or of going down the wrong path. If you can't find a free mentor, there are paid mentorship or tutor platforms. Just do your own research and make sure the person has a good track record of helping beginners. One more thing on community is don't compare yourself harshly with others in the group. It's great to be in a community, but sometimes seeing someone post, just got a job offer after 6 months of learning, can make you feel inadequate, right? Remember, mistake number 1 is everyone learns on a different timeline, right? Use others' success as inspiration. Let it motivate you a little bit here and there. Don't see it as a stick to beat yourself with. In a healthy community, those who succeed will often share how they did it, which is always useful information. And when you succeed, which you will, pay it forward and share your story to help lift someone else up. In short, self-taught doesn't mean alone. Find your tribe, even if it's a small one, right? Humans are social creatures. Having support, accountability, and camaraderie will keep you sane and motivated on this long journey, right? And this is exactly what we built into Sigma School, which is the coding school that I run. And the next mistake is not measuring progress or recognizing growth. This mistake is subtle but deadly for confidence. Many self-taught developers fail to recognize the progress that they've made. And because of that, they feel like they're always spinning their wheels. When you're not learning on your own, there are no grades, no certificates on each step, no teacher saying, good job, you've moved up a new level, right? You have to be your own coach in a way, right? So if you don't periodically take stock of how far you've come along, you might wrongly assume that you haven't learned anything. And that misconception can make people quit. I'll share a simple exercise that worked wonders for me and that I tell all my students. Just look at something you've coded 1 or 2 months ago, compare it to what you can do now. chances are you will cringe a bit your old code, which is actually fantastic. It means that you've improved. You're a different person today. Maybe 2 months ago, you didn't even know how to properly structure a HTML page, and now you're comfortably building multi-page websites. Perhaps your first JavaScript functions were clunky and 30 lines long, and now you know how to write cleaner, shorter functions or use array methods that make it so much more elegant. These are signs of real progress. Yet, when you're in the day-to-day grind, it's hard to notice these improvements because they happen gradually, right? It's like watching a puppy grow. If you see it every day, you don't realize how big it's gotten until you look at a photo from a while back. So keep your old code. Don't delete your early projects out of embarrassment. Archive them as trophies of how far you've come. I still have the very first websites that I made, and it's hideous, and it was basically a bunch of copy-paste from tutorials with my own content swapped in. I keep to remind myself that everyone starts somewhere. Another way to measure progress is to keep track of your milestones. Your first website, your first bug that took you 3 days to fix, and you fixed it, right? Your first time contributing to an open source project or helping someone else debug. Maybe the first time you built a full stack app connecting front end and back end. Write these down in a learning journal or even a simple text file with dates. And on days that you feel like, oh, I'm getting nowhere, read that list. You'll see a path of accomplishments that are easy to forget. And also get feedback from others periodically. This ties back to community and mentorship. When a more experienced developer glances at your code and says, hey, nice approach here. Have you considered also learning about XYZ to improve it? Even that is a validation that yes, you have code worth improving. It's a weird way to think about it, but constructive critique is a sign that you've moved beyond absolute beginner. Early on, everything you write is probably wrong or inefficient. And after some progress, a reviewer will take specific things to nitpick, meaning a lot of the other stuff you did was right. Just take that as a win, right? I remember feeling like I was in a fog where I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? It helped to map out what I had learned and what was next. For example, I'll list down, okay, I know HTML, CSS basics. I built a couple of responsive pages. Check. I learned JavaScript basics. Checked. I haven't touched a front-end framework yet, and that's on my list, right? I also haven't done any back-end. Maybe I'll try Node.js next. Writing it out made the journey tangible and more obvious to me. And it showed me that, hey, I actually covered quite a lot of ground already, and each check mark was a confidence boost. The mistake here is thinking that a lack of perfection equals a lack of progress. Don't do that to yourself. You can always find someone better or something you don't know, and this is true for your entire career in tech. But don't let that blind you to the fact that you are miles ahead of the past version of yourself. Recognize and celebrate that growth because it will be helpful to fuel your optimism and your persistence throughout this journey. Okay, now we're on mistake number 7, which is treating the job search as an afterthought. Eventually, the goal is to land that job. Here, many self-taught developers stumble because they don't approach the job search with the same diligence and strategy that they've applied to learning. I get it. After a long, tiring learning journey, you're exhausted and you just want a reward, right? But getting a job is a new challenge of its own. And yes, it requires a lot of effort and strategy. One common mistake is having a weak or generic portfolio and resume. By portfolio, I don't necessarily mean a super fancy personal website. It's nice to have, but it's not core. Okay, I mean the collection of projects and code that represent your skills. Make sure that your projects are accessible, host them online if possible, and definitely put your code on GitHub. I've seen hiring managers immediately lose interest in candidates who only listed project names on a resume with no links. They think, why can't I see the code or the live demo? Did they actually build it? Is it any good? They can't even see anything, right? Don't give them that out, right? Even if it's a simple project, deploy it on a free service, something like GitHub Pages or Netlify or Heroku, and link it. Include your GitHub URL on your resume. Speaking of resumes, tailor it a bit for tech. List out your technical skills, but don't list out 50 technologies just to look cool, right? List the things that you actually know at least decently well. Highlight projects under your experience section if you don't have relevant work experience. For example, instead of trying to pad with unrelated jobs, you could create an entry like freelance web developer 2023 and bullet point the projects. Or you can say something like developed a full stack MERN application to track personal finances, implementing user authentication and responsive design. Even if no one paid you to do it, and you did the work, just present it. Just do it professionally, right? For cover letters, I know everyone hates them. There's advice floating around to skip cover letters because recruiters don't read them. In my experience, a well-written cover letter that helps you stand out, it can make a difference, especially for junior applicants. It's your chance to convey enthusiasm and fit beyond your bare resume. Keep it short, but customize it to the company. Why do you want a job and how can you contribute? If the company's mission resonates with you, say that. Tell them that. They like to hear that. If you have used their product before and you're passionate about the industry, mention it. Show that you're not just firing off 100 blind applications. Even if you are, right? Nobody likes to feel like they're one of many. Let me emphasize on this. Apply broadly and don't get discouraged by rejection. When I was first job hunting in tech, I sent out nearly 300 applications. There's 300 and the vast majority were black holes. No response, no one getting back to me. Some were polite rejections, a handful led to interviews, and finally one worked out. That's normal because especially in a competitive market like software development, or if you're aiming for junior roles where lots of people are trying to get in, it can feel pretty pretty demoralizing. But remember, you only need one yes. And all the no responses or non-responses don't matter once you have that offer in hand. To keep yourself sane, turn the job hunt into a systematic process rather than an emotional roller coaster. For example, decide you will send 5 applications every weekday and track them in a spreadsheet, the company, the role, the date applied, and any notes that you have. And this makes it a game or a challenge rather than a nebulous, I'll sell some resumes out and cross my fingers. It also helps you follow up. Yes, following up a week or 2 later on an application that you care about can sometimes bump you in their priority list. And please, if you get to the interview stage, prepare for it like it's another skill to learn. Practice common interview questions, both technical and behavioral. If you haven't done data structures and algorithm practices, and you know that the role will have coding challenges, spend some time on LeetCode or HackerRank for a few weeks beforehand. It's a bit of a separate track from web development, but many companies expect you to solve a couple of algorithmic problems and challenges, so don't get blindsided by that. The job search can feel like a whole new learning curve because it is, right? Approach it with curiosity rather than desperation, and treat it like a project. You're building your career launch just like you're building your apps. And every rejection or interview that you don't ace is feedback to learn from, not a verdict on your worth. Which leads me to my final and perhaps the most important mistake to avoid. You probably sense a theme through all these points, which is don't quit. So mistake number 8 is giving up too soon, aka forgetting about perseverance. Do not quit, right? The only guaranteed way to fail at becoming a developer is to stop trying. It sounds cliche, but it's true. I've seen so many promising learners give up right before they were about to turn a corner. It's like that meme of the guy mining underground who stops one swing away from hitting the diamond vein. Often when things feel the most frustrating, you are on the verge of a breakthrough, a surge in understanding, or that job offer coming true. One of my role models, Patrick Grove, who is a very successful venture builder and entrepreneur, he studied tons of entrepreneurs and noted that the key common trait is perseverance. It's the innate ability to keep going when the end seems near, to never give up, and to keep trying until something finally works. That trait is more important than raw intelligence or resources. I firmly believe the same applies to getting into tech. You don't have to be a genius. I'm certainly not, right? You just have to be relentless and adaptable. Now, I'm not suggesting for you to bash your head against the wall blindly. If something isn't working, persevere and adjust. For example, if you've applied to 100 jobs and not gotten any interviews or anyone replying you, do not quit, but do step back and ask yourself, is my resume effective? Am I applying for the right kinds of roles? Should I network more instead of just cold applying? Get feedback, iterate on your approach, and continue. Perseverance isn't stubbornly doing the same thing over and over again if it's not yielding results. It's continually finding and iterating on ways when you hit obstacles. And let me share a personal low point. After months of coding on my own, I hit a phase where I felt like an imposter. I thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this, right? I'll never be as good as those CS grads. I nearly shelved the whole idea of a tech career. And what saved me was a combination of the early points we discussed. I talked to my friends, my mentors about it. That's community. I looked back at my old projects. That's progress when I felt stuck. And I realized my expectations were skewed. I was comparing to someone with 4 years of degree training. So I decided to give it one last push. And during that period, I built one of my best projects, which later became a cornerstone of my portfolio. And a couple months later, I landed like a few software projects that I could work on. And imagine if I had quit a week before building that project, the narrative would have been, I tried coding for a bit, but it didn't work out. And if you could relate to that, then this video is definitely for you. And I've never known how close I was. So how do you cultivate perseverance? Partly through everything we've already talked about, having fun to avoid burnout, being disciplined and consistent, getting support, acknowledging your wins. It all builds a mindset that can weather the storms. And also, sometimes it's about managing those outside pressures. Maybe it's family or friends that are skeptical, asking, so when are you going to get a job? And why are you doing that funny coding thing, right? I know that that can weigh on you. I can relate to you. Remember that you are driving the bus, not them. You do not, and you absolutely do not owe them an explanation, and you do not owe anyone an overnight success. Prove it through results when you're ready. Until then, just keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, and keep coding until you get good enough. And a quick note is that the tech industry can be volatile. When maybe you're learning during a tough economic time, when companies are slowing down on hiring, that can extend your search or make it feel futile. But cycles come and go, right? If you keep improving yourself, when the tide turns, you will be the one ready to grab the opportunity. As Naval Ravikant says in a broader context, apply specific knowledge with leverage and eventually you will get what you deserve. In our context, your specific knowledge is your coding ability and leverage is all the tools, community, and strategies that you use. Eventually, they will all pay off. And to cap this off, I want you to internalize this. You are probably closer to success than you think. Many of the software developers I've known who quit were actually just a few weeks or a couple of projects away from becoming job ready. It's just so hard to see that from the inside. I get it, right? So take it from someone who's seen the pattern over over and over and over again. Do not give up on yourself. Be patient. Keep learning. Keep applying. Keep improving. And the only way you lose is if you leave the game entirely. All right. So in conclusion, being a software developer is a challenging but incredibly rewarding journey. Yes, it's longer and twistier than the neat packaged paths some bootcamps or universities might advertise, but it also molds you into a resourceful, resilient, and a self-reliant problem solver. And that's pure gold in the tech world. Avoid these common mistakes, right? Keep your expectations realistic, learn by building, infuse your own interests, build habits for consistency, find your community, track progress, be strategic in your job hunt, and above all, persevere and don't give up. I speak from my heart. I went from an outsider in tech, teaching myself at odd hours, to running a tech business and helping others get into tech. If I could do it, truly, so can you. There's a quote from Brad Jacobs, a businessman that I admire a lot, right? So much of success comes from keeping your head in a good place. Expect positive outcomes. Stop beating yourself up mentally. Keep mindset positive. Don't beat yourself up over mistakes. Learn from them. Each bug that you fix, each project that you finish, each rejection that you overcome is making you better. So stay humble, stay hungry, and keep going. Your future developer self is waiting for you. I can't wait to see what you're going to build and what you're going to achieve. Good luck and all the best. I'll see you soon.